the son-in-law of the chief minister.
Viewers, we are now cutting across to visuals coming in from Nairobi, where people have taken to the streets to protest against police brutality. These protests are only now picking up steam. Anger has reignited over the long-standing issue over the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody and the close-range shooting by police of vendor Boniface Kariuki during protests for Ojwang mid-June. Human rights groups have long called for action over illegal arrests, detentions and torture of government critics in Kenya. And President William Ruto has vowed to end police brutality, saying no enforced disappearance would happen during his administration. But Ruto's interior minister told police to shoot on sight, anyone who approaches the police stations during protests. After 5 police stations were torched. So as you can see that Nairobi remains tense, and these are the latest visuals from Nairobi, Kenya, marking the democracy uprising, and the Kenyans frustrated over economic stagnation, corruption and acts of police brutality. And Krutat joins us live on the broadcast. For more, Krutat, we've seen that there has been looting, there has been widespread violence in Kenya, flashpoint being in Nairobi against police brutality. What more details are you picking up?
Indeed, and Rakshita, this is a very important day, July 7th, which is often marked and mired by a lot of violence and rallies in support of pro-democracy protest anniversaries. And today in particular, we have seen massive police blocking on the main roads in the capital city of Nairobi, as the visuals on the screen, anticipating these protests, which indeed turned out to be violent. People each year rally on July 7th since 1990 to mark the Kenyans' demand of the return of multi-party democracy after the years of rule of the autocratic rule of then President Daniel Moi. And after this now, there has been another round of protests that have taken place today, in which we have seen that the police has come down very heavily after the blocking of the roads was done on the main road. So this was an anticipation. This is the 35th anniversary, in fact, of those pro-democracy protests. And this year's main theme of the protests and the main cause of the protesters has been various incidents that have led up to this overboil, including the death of bloggers in police custody, including police brutality that has become a central issue. President Ruto, however, as you rightly mentioned, has been assuring the people to be away from violence. We have seen the visuals in which police have also used tear gas and water cannon on Monday to disperse the crowds along a key artery in Nairobi as hundreds of demonstrators advanced, some even blowing whistles while they were marching. So those are some visuals of the clashes that we are reporting live from Nairobi as shots come in as we speak. These are visuals in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, where the protests on the 30th anniversary of the pro-democracy protests, when the multi-party system of democracy was abolished in Kenya, is being marked again, once again, unfortunately, with a lot of violence in the capital city. Back to the studio.
Absolutely. The streets of Nairobi we see are tense once again, and we have, you can see that boundary wall with hundreds of youngsters in Nairobi. There you have live visuals coming in from Nairobi of Kenya, and the youngsters frustrated by the economic policies, by what has been happening in police custodies. We see that these youngsters have taken to the streets 24/7. We see what has been happening, the vandalism. Roads have been blocked. And this is the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, viewers, as the protesters take to the streets. Tear gas, you can see the smoke. You can see that tear gas by being used by the administration to disperse the protesters. And police, of course, also now finding it a bit difficult to handle because there are so many of the protesters who have now gathered. And this is, of course, also against what Kenyan Human Rights Commission says is against the enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings. And many of these, there were many of the police stations, remember, that were torched by the protesters. And the rising economic expectations and the police brutality have created anger in Kenya, and we've seen how the response has been. It's going violent in Kenya, and there are many people. In fact, this is happening since 2024. Krutarth, this is happening since 2024, a year ago, and several people also died. And what happened? And many of them were detained illegally. And now we see that these protests are now being reignited, despite we see assurances from the president. There's nothing changed, it seems. Purtart.
Indeed, Rakshita, and these are dramatic visuals as we are tracking, as there was a complete shutdown of all the shops that we can see there, as the police had already put in. The Interior Ministry of Kenya has in fact given a very strong statement calling this terrorism in the guise of dissent. So very strong statement coming in from the Kenyan leadership there, which many reporters from the West Asia coverage are also claiming to be a massive civic apathy of the government against the rights and the causes of concern of the protesters gathered over there. We are also getting information that the government of Kenya has also given a shoot at sight order to their policemen in order to bring the situation under control. We see arson is also being one of the major causes of concern. Some plumes of smoke rising over there, along with mass gatherings on the main arterial roads. These are visuals coming in live, ladies and gentlemen, from the capital city of Kenya, that is Nairobi, which is marking the 35th anniversary of the protests that have happened in East African nations for the past 35 years, at least since 1990, when the multi-party democracy system of Kenya was abolished after a long rule of a prime minister. And subsequently, this day has been marked overall as a day of dissent against the government over the period of many years. This year also, we are seeing again protests turning extremely violent, which were anticipated. There you can see vehicles have been tossed on fire with huge plumes of smoke emerging, with protesters gathering there in mass numbers. Police just moments ago was also seen firing tear gas cans, as at the same time some water cannons also for dispersing the crowd. However, so far the effort seems to have not been yielding any proper discernible result. At the moment, the situation continues to remain tense, and we'll be closely tracking all the developments coming out of Nairobi in Kenya.
Thank you so much, Purtart, for joining us and giving us a perspective of what's happening and those latest visuals coming in from Nairobi as the tensions are reigniting on the streets, as we see in those visuals.